the way to build $1 billion company is just to listen to yourself.
And I just understand that I can't do this anymore.
Founders have to be able to be with what's true.
Taking care of founders was your main responsibility.
I am a Cancer, Moon, Capricorn, Sun.
And have you ever counted how many founders you helped?
I have.
Really?
The shadow side of being able to build out a dream is learning to manage that fear appropriately.
Startup founders are so much in doubts of themselves, in proving what they're doing to the world.
Founders are human beings, and we human beings have feelings.
Hey you, an awesome listener. I'm Stacy, co-founder of Awesomic and your host today. Our first episode is dedicated to the topic of how does it feel to be a founder. I'm Ukrainian who moved to San Francisco a few years ago in the middle of war to build and keep scaling my global company. And this is how I was able to connect with an amazing person in front of me, Amy Buechler.
Amy Buechler, a licensed psychotherapist, executive coach who works with startup founders, the first in-house founder coach and batch director at YCombinator. In 2019, she launched the Founder Coach, a practice focused on helping founders grow alongside their companies.
Given what's happening at my home and with my family, it is and was the darkest times of my life. But that's how I was introduced to Amy, and Amy literally helped thousands of startup founders to go through the hardships. Amy, happy to welcome you here.
Thanks for the intro. It's so nice to be here with you.
So as long as I know, you're the licensed therapist for a private practice in San Francisco, and then got introduced to tech industry that you were not that much aware of, and connecting to one tech recruiter, you were introduced then to YC people, YCombinator.
Yeah, I was hired at YC to look after founders. That was my entire job description. YC was really small then, so were the batches. So there wasn't any structure. I didn't have a manager. There wasn't a job description. Like, they just sort of had an idea that there was work to be done to support founders. And so I invented the job description as time passed, and as the YC team grew and as the batches grew, and it just became immediately obvious to me as soon as I started there, because I was already a therapist, that founders are people too. And you guys have a lot of feelings and a lot of challenges that come along with running a startup, but there weren't any specialized resources to support the very specific nature. Over the course of time, it just made more sense for me to focus on that than to do anything else. And so in 2019, I left YC just to focus on coaching full-time, and that's what I've been doing since then.
Have you ever counted how many founders you helped?
I have.
Really?
I have, but I stopped counting it like a year and a half ago. But when I counted, while I was at YC, I supported 750 early stage startups. And then since just focusing on coaching full-time, I'd supported somewhere around 600 later stage founders.
I'm talking to other founders, and I know that usually they know their darkest days or periods. And I do remember one of the darkest days of mine. I was sitting near the pool. It was summer. Startup is startuping, everything is on fire. And I just understand that I can't do this anymore. I'm sitting in the nice background near the pool in kind of like spa hotel because I wanted to unwind for a few days just to change the environment. And it did not help at all. And I remember just staring at my laptop, not being able to send any more emails, not even read any more email. I'm frozen, paralyzed, and I can't do this anymore. And this was a moment when the thought appeared to me because of YC, your talk. So I was just hitting your Twitter message, DMing like, Amy, I'm not sure if you remember me, I'm Stacy, I'm going through some deep shit of my own, and I really want to talk with you, to get any help possible. And if you remember, it was summer. You were on vacation, but you read it, you replied ASAP, you jumped on a call, free call with me just ASAP, and you just gave me clear instructions and plan. What do I need to do to pick up that mess into some version of person? And after that, it was the opening, and we started working together. I don't know how I would do this without you, actually, with all of those steps about this is the therapist, this is what you do, this is the next step, just giving me that plan, because I felt like even high performers, when they're in that situation, they're kind of helpless. We can know how to help others, but pretty helpless about themselves. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that often of people just coming to you when they're in pieces?
Yes, that's a really normal state.
Oh.
Not always, but for sure. I listen to you and I can hear things that you don't know. Like, that's not the right way of saying it, but like, every time I'm talking with my clients, I'm listening to the truth of what you're saying. And it's not always the case, but it's almost always the case that there's signal in what you feel is noise. And I'm listening to that and I pick it up and I often just repeat back what you said to me that you don't know you said to me.
Yes.
You know, and so I help you listen to yourself more. There's a strategic reason that I do that in my coaching that comes from my experiences at YC, because I ran the batches. And so I listened to hundreds of off-the-record talks that dinner speakers would come and deliver to batches. And one of the things that I learned in listening to story after story, from Airbnb to Coinbase to Boom, you know, all of the big names in the YC portfolio, is that every founder's story is completely unique. No one else could have built that startup except for that founder who made that particular decision in that moment in time, given everything that's true about themselves, their experiences, what they decided to optimize for, what their values are, what the state of the team is, what the state of the market is, and their analysis of it. And so I actually think it's really important for founders to be able to listen to themselves. You're building something that's never been created before, that no one else has ever done, and the courage to be able to follow through with what you're saying. And so, yes, you came to me in quite a state, but I was listening like, oh, Stacy doesn't know, I'm making this up, Stacy doesn't know she needs to slow down. Stacy doesn't know that she needs to have that conversation with an employee. Stacy doesn't know she needs to reprioritize her tasks. But I know part of her does because she's saying that. You're saying like, all my stuff is a mess and I have no idea what to do. And there's this thing with this employee and like all this stuff's like, okay, like those are the steps and let's just put them in order and I'll feed it back to you.
Does it feel too that you're working kind of like an X-ray? Like screening through people?
Yeah, that's unfortunately what really gets in my way in my personal life.
Why?
I'm learning that not everyone likes to be seen so like fully and completely. I'm learning it's like not that fun.
You already touched the points and those words as burnout or lack of losing motivation, lack of motivation. So we're starting to tap into why is it hard to be a founder. We see the shiny part of things, TechCrunch articles, fundraising announcements, hiring people. But what is beneath the surface that you see people actually pay for their success, or not even only success, just for this privilege of building your own thing?
I think two things are true when it comes to starting a startup. And one thing that's true is that it's such a privilege and it's so amazing to be able to see something that's wrong in the world and to identify a problem and then to be able to dream a dream. I think the difficulty is what that also means is that you're building something that's literally never been created before.
Yeah.
Often you're building a technology that's literally never existed before. There are so many startups that are just based on brand new technologies. And the experience of building something new requires resources. It requires funding, it requires headcount, it requires so much time, it requires a lot physically from you. It is often resource expensive, and there's never enough resources. In startups, you almost always have to raise money. You almost always have to hire a team. You almost always have to find those resources because there are never enough of them to do what you want to do in the time that you have, which is also an incredibly limited resource. The corresponding emotion to not having enough of anything is fear. And the internalized experience of fear is anxiety, because our minds are always trying to de-risk this problem or solve this existential threat or like deliver this feature, land this sale. Like Our minds, when we're afraid, are always trying to solve the problem and get some safety and security. And founders then have a years-long lived experience that's based mostly in fear. That is incredibly dysregulating for the nervous system. It affects sleep. It can impact relationships. When we live soaked in fear, almost all of our systems of resilience fray. And if we live in that world long enough, they just kind of shatter and break, right? And so the shadow side of being able to build out a dream is learning to manage that fear appropriately, because the truth is it's always going to be a little scary. You're taking a big risk. It's a bit of a moonshot, whatever it is. It's definitely not guaranteed that it's going to work out regardless of your stage, right? Even in later stages, things are scary. And the opportunity is to find, I think, smart and wise moments of building trust explicitly, because trust is the emotional counterbalance to fear. And so as much as there is to be afraid of, it's also important to know what you can trust. I trust myself. I trust my team. I trust I can figure this out somehow. You know, like I trust our product. I trust that like my read on the market is right. I trust this is the right time. Like, and not just knowing that, but also being able to embody it to give our nervous systems and our bodies a break.
How often do you deal with more severe cases where that fear is transitioning person somewhere down the road, which can be like burnout, maybe depressions, maybe like constant anxiety states?
I would say that founders' mental health, for lack of a better word, is fluid. I could start working with a client who's totally on top of the world, feeling great, growth is skyrocketing, all the right people are in place, there's nothing but like green sky, green grass and opportunity out ahead of us. And then 2 months later, they're collapsed in the shower because everything is broken and they don't feel like they have the energy to keep going. And so I would say that it's more common than not to be in and out of the ups and the downs in really intense ways over the entire course of running a startup. And the trick is not to like expect that you won't have those. The trick is to sort of decrease the amplitude. And so the like really amazing things, you can like juice them for all they're worth, but even the low lows, you remember this is going to pass. I've been through something like this before, probably. I know I can get through it. I can get through this one in the future, right? And just to sort of decrease the amount of time spent in the lows, that's sort of ideal.
Are you talking about decreasing the time? Or in my opinion, it was also decreasing intensity?
Both.
Both.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Ideally. And that's a practice that takes time.
Have you ever thought about why is it so different for startup founders versus regular founders? I mean, business owners, just business people at responsible jobs, at stressful jobs, like doctors. They're also experiencing a lot of stress. But in my opinion, difference is also in that you just mentioned an example where a person was top of the world and collapsed in 2 months. But usually as a founders, we're having such an intensity, even the same day, the same week, of the highest highs and lowest low packed maybe in 1 hour. What do you think about it, and like what makes it special and how to navigate that?
I think there's a couple features that are specific to startups that are not quite as intense in being an entrepreneur of like a brick and mortar or something like that, or even being like a exec at a Fortune 500 or something. And those specifics are the pressure, the responsibility, and the speed. Pressure because you have to do it all. Like you are fully responsible for the success of the failure, not just of the product, but of your employees' livelihoods. Like there is nothing but pressure on you to succeed, and not just to succeed in a middling way. You know, like no one's really out there to like land $150 million exit. You're like, you feel pressure to like be in the billions, to be huge, to be deeply impactful. Like all of this pressurizes the founder. And again, in an environment that's mostly based in fear, that can be really scattering. That can be really defocusing. That can just add more pressure to a psychology that's already pretty shaky.
Let's talk about authenticity a bit. You mentioned that before, and I've heard that from other founders, that they're curious where the line is between being authentic expressing yourself, but also stretching yourself into becoming someone like the better version. Where do you see this going?
Where I go when you ask that question is growth. I think where founders get the most lost and confused is when they begin to grow a competing authentic desire, which is to take care of themselves as just a living, breathing organism, you know? Your body will tell you when you need to sleep. Your body will tell you when you need to eat, exercise, have sex, connect with your family. Your body will tell you what's authentic to you and what's required. And founders get into a lot of hot water when they think that those wishes conflict. And I really encourage my clients to think about those things as if they are harmonious, actually. That the thing that will allow you to keep going and build the amazing thing and connect with that authentic desire and ambition is your ability to take care of yourself moment to moment so that you can keep focused on that big dream.
And I remember you once sharing that what you just mentioned, it's basically trusting yourself in what feels right at that moment. And once you mentioned that the right decision is the one that you made, it's actually just up to you and the choice. Can you share a few words about that?
The first thing I'll say is I don't think, and I don't want to say to the world that the way to build $1 billion company is just to listen to yourself. I think it's a balance, listening to your sense, your own intuition, listening to your own vision and your own roadmap, and balancing that out with actual data and feedback that you're getting from the world and from your user. And founders are always trying to balance between what do I believe to be right versus what is the world telling me is right. And that's just a wobble. That's just I'm just gonna do my best here and see what's true. And I agree with you that it's harder than not to listen to yourself. And that's because what you're ingesting is so much noise from the world. And what you're ingesting is so much messaging from your team about how things need to be different. Like, you're just getting so much information coming at you that sitting with yourself and knowing what is true for you can sometimes take a little bit of muscle.
This fear of being excluded from the tribe.
There's just so many things wrapped up in that. Now, and there's so many open questions too. Is that person presenting to the world out of their own insecurity, out of their own internalized messaging that they've gotten from society about who they must be because of their status in the world? And is that the reason that they're choosing to present how they are? Or are they doing it because they think that's how they want to be successful? Or are they doing it out of, I don't know. I think I don't know where that would be coming from, and so I can't speak to it. But I will say there's what drives authenticity is a sense of personal power and a sense of courage and confidence to just be who you are and to do what you do and to do what you know is right. That's what allows us to be authentic in the world. A different way of defining confidence is that it's just being able to trust yourself.
I love your definition of confidence and how you tie that with trust. So maybe you can share more about what we actually need, why processing is so important, and what we actually need to feel rather than avoid to be successful, even though at the moment it might feel horrible.
One important point, one baseline assumption fundamentally in what you're saying, I want to pull out because I think it's important for everyone to hear, which is that founders are human beings and we human beings have feelings. And I actually think that's just really important to recognize because I think the world has had a way of making successful people in business or founders believe that in order to be successful, you can't have feelings and you shouldn't have feelings.
Yeah.
And so we sort of live in a world in which feelings have gotten minimized and shamed and shut down by society. And so we do that to ourselves. And so what that means is that founders on a day-to-day basis are feeling things like jealousy at a competitor, fear at how the heck are we going to do all of this, anger that this is moving too slowly or this person is screwing up, or love and joy, yes, we finally got a win, inspiration. guilt. There is an enormous number of feelings that founders feel on a daily basis. And because the baseline emotional state of every founder is already elevated, because they're already managing a whole lot of fear on a daily basis, that means that there's less psychological bandwidth to deal with all of these emotions all of the time. And so in a sort of like your elevated baseline state, you add in all of the different wins and losses, failures and successes over the course of the day. That's can be totally overwhelming. Totally overwhelming. And when founders are overwhelmed with emotion, especially if a lot of that is fear, their brains literally shut off. Their brains shut off. Brain processing goes from the frontal cortex back into the limbic system, and the frontal cortex is the part of the brain responsible for strategy, decision making, scheduling, like all the really important things that founders want to be able to use their brain for. When they're emotionally overwhelmed, they literally cannot. And so imagine that every founder in your industry building your product is all like just this far away from being completely overwhelmed and non-functional, right? Locked into fight, flight, or freeze, like not effective whatsoever as a founder, right? And then imagine that you have built the skill and the ability to regulate your emotions, to know what you're feeling in the moment and why, to neutralize that fear that you're feeling, right? To be able to open up more space to run your company and do everything that you have to do. So yeah, during COVID, this became so incredibly clear to me because that was a moment where probably within 36 hours, like every market crumbled immediately, like every single one. And that made founders terrified. It put them into grief. Like everyone in that moment in time that I spoke with, I think I probably spoke with like 50 founders that week minimum. Every founder was basically non-operational, couldn't function, had no frontal cortex whatsoever. And what I noticed was that because every founder was going through the same challenge, they had to restructure their product, they had to scrap their product, they had to fire 70% of the team, right? They had to respond in similar ways. The founders who had a practice of knowing what they're feeling, being able to manage it, being effective regardless of what they're feeling, like the founders who could manage their psychologies were able to get through that same decision-making process within 3 days. And my slowest client at it took about 3 months minimum. And even after that, he really struggled with a lot of grief and a lot of regret that really sort of backed up his execution in the moment. And so COVID was like a big, giant, crazy event. But imagine like mini COVIDs happening all the time, day in, day out. Do you want to be faster than your competitors at executing or not? That's why I think processing your emotions is a competitive advantage, because it allows you to stay physically more capable and effective in the moment.
So getting to the tools, what would you recommend founders, maybe with self-help, maybe with other experts' help?
I will answer that question tactically. First, I want to share a thought, which is just because I'm a therapist, it's not true that I think that like founders feeling their feelings is like the end all be all and that it's like the solution to anything, right? Like what I think is really important is that founders are able to balance their feeling with thought. In terms of tools, how founders can balance their thoughts with their emotions, assuming that you have no tools or skills, it's actually really simple. Where you start from is just taking time to notice them. And that's simple, but it's actually not easy, especially if you're a startup founder where you never actually have enough time to do anything, let alone check in with yourself, right?
Exactly.
But that's a small skill that's simple that builds and builds and builds. And so that's the most important, smallest thing that I recommend every founder does is like set an alarm to go off 3 times a day. That's just like, how am I feeling? You know, and just to like start getting in the practice of closing your eyes, pausing whatever you're doing and asking yourself, how do I feel in my body? Could I name that emotion? Okay. What am I thinking? Okay. And just starting there, because sometimes there will be rich information. I feel terrified about this next meeting I'm going to step into. If that's information, you can then add in a next step. Okay, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths to get back to regulation, so I have all of the brain power possible to have the best meeting. But you can't do something unless you know what's true. And so just starting, taking 15 seconds 3 times a day just to notice, how am I feeling? What am I thinking?
I was suggested many years ago as a similar practice, kind of like hello moment alarm that is happening like 5-10 times a day, just to wake you up, to let you see what's happening around, to register that. And this is the tool to understand how your life is going. You're always taking pauses to think of complicated questions or to connecting with yourself. And maybe you're the first person who I've met doing this regularly, like before jumping to any answer, just like, let me feel how I feel about that. Is it coming from your therapist background? Like, where is it habit coming from?
It's a good question. I often 10 times a session will say, give me just a second to organize my thoughts. And that's like my line. And I do that because I am a Cancer moon, Capricorn sun. And that means that my internal experience is pure emotion. Like I'm just feeling all these different sensations and feelings, but I'm trying to organize them. Like I'm trying to make sense of what I'm feeling and sensing from you. I need time to catch up to myself. In the early days of building anything, I would say probably before head count 7 to 15, you're just doing for the most part. You're just fully in action, execution, like having to do 15 things all at once that was all you needed to do it 5 months ago, you know? And it's almost like the sense I always get is like, you're so forward, you're so in action, you're so just in the world doing. And by the time founders hire a team, I'd say around headcount 2025, there's other people to do the doing. But the founders who don't have the skill of sitting back within themselves, thinking, considering the best form of action, thinking about delegating, thinking about communicating this, thinking about how is everything going, thinking about how am I feeling. The founders who only know how to act have no idea what to do when their company grows. Right? Their entire sense of value and purpose comes from doing. But when you have a team around you, what is often most important is getting out of the way. And that means taking time within yourself to be a little bit more thoughtful and to balance, again, thought with action. For sure.
And I think it also does not feel like work.
It doesn't. Somehow.
Action, like driven.
It sounds like you can relate. Yeah, do you want to share a story?
No, not really, but I can more witness that from my partner. He's so much action driven, and it's so hard at times just to sit him down and like, this is work. We're now talking that through, and like we might talk through some, I don't know, conflict or decision, and it's also work because it will save us from like bigger snowballs or like wisdom coming from coaching, actually.
It's necessary work. There's no one else in the company who's going to be thinking about what we're all doing together and making sure that everything's right. The teams are aligned, timing is right, we're working on the right things. And the sort of deeper psychological piece within all of that actually is about self-worth and self-esteem, that founders are relearning that they can be valuable, worthwhile human beings disconnected from action, regardless of what they do in the world. I have enough value as a human being. My thoughts have enough value that they're worth an hour or 2 out of my week every week. Founders have to be able to be with what's true. Founders can't build a product and like muscle and strong arm their way into, you know, product market fit if their users are like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. You know what I mean? Like, and that's an easy example. Founders need to learn how to listen to negative user feedback. It's sort of the same principle here where, and listening to negative user feedback sometimes hurts and takes bravery. It's like, oh, I have to literally rip out everything that I've just spent 2 weeks on and try again. I hate that. It's not that dissimilar. You're just the user is you. And can you be brave enough to sit with your own truth, knowing that only sometimes an action in the world will be required. And I actually think that's really important for founders to know. You guys have such a strong bias to action, especially in the early stages, that you assume, as soon as I know it's true, I automatically have to go do something. As soon as I know I need creativity, I have to redefine my job description. I have to leave the company. And it's like, no, like you just sit with what's true. And a lot of the time there actually isn't a change to make. It's like, oh, interesting. Like I really didn't like the way my co-founder just said that to me. Okay. Is there anything to do about that? No. Okay. You know, so like, I want to de-risk the truth from human beings and make it okay that the truth is what it is. And if there is a truth that feels big and important and meaningful enough to make a change on it, you're just responding to what's true.
But founders are also, I think, masters of changing the truth, what others perceive as status quo. And they're like, no, this is not how I see the things. How to protest that?
It's such a great question. In that use case, right, a founder has, let's just say, a vision for a company or a product that like absolutely they see clear as day. This solves so many problems. Like this is absolutely how the world should be. This is how this person's experience should be. I know I can do it. In that use case, that can't and should never go away. That's so deeply authentic, right? That knowing. And so the world might push you around and maybe the details change and something changes, but ideally your vision never does, right? And so being able to sit with what's true does require a little bit of mastery around, I know deeply that this is true. No one could possibly talk me out of this. I feel it in every single cell of my being. But the details I'm not totally clear on. You know, like that's I think actually a really solid place for founders to land.
For many years, I think my mentor, in a way, she's also a therapist. She mentioned a phrase like, perfect is never real and real is never perfect. So it helped me as a perfectionist in a way just to let go of some of the things. And you mentioned sitting with the truth. What about quitting? And to founders, even the thought of it feels really scary. How to sit with this? And when is the right time to act upon it? And when it's just a bad moment or a few or a period?
Yeah, it's such a good question. It can be so terrifying for founders to have that thought, I can't do this anymore. It can be so destabilizing. It causes even more anxiety. Like it's a big deal for founders to have that thought. I always feel like it's like lightning is like blowing them up when they think that. And this is where I think it's really important to remember that not all truths require action. And that what can feel really true in one moment might not be true in the next. And this is where having that built-in practice of like 3 times a day, I'm going to ask myself, what's true? How am I feeling? What am I thinking? And I'm not going to do anything about it, right? Maybe later. But to sort of track over time, if it continues to be true and circumstances have changed, time has passed, and you're still really miserable, then it might be worth thinking about, if I were to do something about this, what might that look like, right? And be open to the possibility that the next day or the next week, you're not thinking it at all. And that's okay too. And so again, I think the important thing is just to be okay with what's true and to decouple it from action until it feels right to act on it.
And before we wrap up, when I was preparing, and for those questions specifically, founders point me that quitting feels like losing and they want to win in the startup game. What do you think about this concept of actually attributing your success to the kind of startup game and also perceiving that as winning and losing, and who defines what is victory in this game? To me, shortly, I would say that there is no way to be a loser after doing this leap of faith of building your own thing, because the experiences, the courage, the process, the skills that you need will be so valuable whatever you're doing then. You're building relationships, you're a stay-at-home mom, you're doing something else. It's just that dynamic. It's really helpful. So what do you think about that attribution of winning, losing, and founders be really focused at being perceived as winners?
The conversation I have more frequently with founders is, how do I define success?
Yeah.
Because success is also subjective.
Yeah.
And especially my later stage founders, like, if I IPO and I make a bunch of money, like, is that what success is? What about the gate that I can see that's past that? Like, and who defines what success is? If my investors tell me that's a good return, am I gonna agree? Like, do I feel like that's success for me? And so I wanna share that just to say that on either end of the category, it's a completely subjective, self-defined measure, right? What does success look like for you, feel like for you? What will your life look and feel like? What does your product look and feel like? Your team, like, how do you want to feel and be in that experience of success, whatever it is, being open to it changing once you sort of achieve that? And also, what would failure look like?
Yeah.
I think when founders think about failure and are afraid of failure, the thing they're actually afraid of is their friends and family being disappointed in them. And what I say to that is, would your best friends, like, really, like, they would never talk to you again? Like, if you had to come to them and you're like, it didn't work out, like, and they're like, oh, yeah, no, I guess, like, they would never say that,
Yes.
And so it's like, their founders aren't afraid of failing. They're afraid of losing people that they find out they would never lose by failing.
Yeah.
And they can be afraid of missing their one shot at something, but that's also almost never based in reality, because life is long and things change, and other dreams can be birthed and other rounds can be raised. And, like, if you're able to get to a place where you have one shot, you can absolutely get to a place where you have a second, given, as you said, all the people you know, all the lessons you've learned, all the experiences you have. And so, like, to this I say, define what it means to fail. Ask yourself, would that actually happen? And be open to realizing, I guess not, and then keep going. And then also define what it means to be successful, right? And try to keep your eye on that. If you define what success is, then you'll have a better chance of achieving it anyway.
As we're moving to closure, it's an open question. What feels right for you here as a closure for those founders who might be on the journey, maybe in struggle, maybe they want to be inspired, maybe they want some tools. But in terms of defining success, if success is just to stay sane along the way, not really get crazy. Any last thoughts about that, or maybe advice?
I think my closing thoughts and advice to any founders or aspiring founders who are listening is, keep doing what works. And don't be afraid to change something if something starts to not work. And that's pretty simple, but it's actually hard. And what it requires is small sort of micro decisions moment to moment. Like, if you're doing stuff and it's working, there's nothing to change. If you notice that you're doing stuff, but then you suddenly find yourself you're a little too tired, or you don't have a really strong relationship with your co-founder, or you don't know how to have this conversation with your employee, then don't be afraid to do something about that, right? To build a skill, to have that difficult conversation, to change your sleep schedule, like to make a small change in the moment, because those will build and build and build. And if you're courageous enough to make small tweaks here and there to what you're doing and how you're doing it, then it's going to be even more rare to have to make giant sweeping changes either to yourself, to your relationships, or to your company. So if everything's like working, keep going, like don't stop. And if something isn't, then again, don't be afraid to fix it.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm happy to have you today, and that you're exactly the person who helped me to go through this conversation of how it feels to be a founder. with your experiences, but also with your heart. And I have no idea how you're able to open up to so many people. And behind the scenes, Amy mentioned that she remembers all her founders from the batches, and their batches being the batch director for more than 4 years. So it's like hundreds of founders going through her hands, being carried by Amy, but still remembering their details. It's not only a big library, but a big heart of yours. Thank you for spending this time today with me, and I'm very grateful for every awesome listener who is today with us, and I hope you feel inspired. I hope you feel not alone on this journey, and for the greatest, most interesting liked comment that we receive, we will have some secret gift. We're still talking with Amy what it will be. She's writing a book, spoiler, so we'll figure out the way how to thank you for your attention and listening to us. Have a great journey of your startup as well.
Thank you so much.